Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my favorite reads of 2024 slash anticipated reads of 2025 video. This is ostensibly my beginning of the year video, always very exciting. I feel like I come on the tail end of this sort of content on BookTube. And yes, we're a couple days into 2025, but I feel like, nobody can say yet that we're not at the beginning of the year, that time has flown by in 2025 yet. We're only a couple days in, as I said. My sister's birthday is actually tomorrow as I film this, and it's on the 5th, so I'm heading out this weekend to spend time with her, so that's exciting. But before I get to that, I wanted to, get this video up there. And in this video, I have whittled down my 2024 reading list into 3 favorites. And then I have 7 anticipated books to talk about, which technically are coming out in like the first 3 months of the year. I tend to try to, widen my scope to like the first 6 months, and then mid-year I'll do more anticipated reads for the second half of the year. And it turned out there's a lot of exciting books on my list that just happened to come out relatively soon, so that's pretty cool. But to start with my fave books of 2024, I'm just putting them in order, starting with my 3rd place book. And this book actually I read relatively recently, just a couple weeks ago, so there's a little bit of iffiness, like if I had time to sit with it, would my opinion shift, but that's just the luck of the draw of, how a year works, I suppose. And I'm putting in my number 3 spot, The Cost of Free Land, Jews, Lakota, and an American Inheritance by Rebecca Claren. This book is like part memoir and also part social history, U.S. history. And it starts with Claren's family. One of her ancestors was a Jew who was brutalized in one of the Russian Empire pogroms at the end of the 19th century. And so the family ultimately moved, with a lot of other Russian Jews of the time, from Russia to the U.S., where they could be treated as citizens and expect a better life. And while there, they took advantage of the Homestead Act passed by the Lincoln administration that was open to all, both Americans and, immigrants, that if you cultivate some, government chartered land for 6 years and, do something productive with it, that land would become yours. What they did not know at the time was that land was stolen, essentially, from indigenous peoples, particularly in South Dakota, where they ended up from Lakota nations. So a few generations later, Claren is a reporter, and she's becoming more aware of this situation. And in this book, it's basically chartering a path towards amends. She details how her own family profited during this time, and also more generally the family history during the time, and also what was going on concurrently with the Lakota peoples and how much, harm the U.S. government did, from violent genocidal harm to breaking treaties and etc. So a lot of this book is just about acknowledging these realities, and then she does get into a little bit of religious text study within Judaism about how to try and make amends, which leads her ultimately beyond, recounting the history. She details, altruistic things she's done beyond the scope of the book as well. But I really, I appreciated this book on a personal level because my own family history is similar. And I appreciated how this book was a book that made a call for social justice without being self-righteous and appealing to, some sort of purity culture. I think that this was very earnest, and the history on its own was, engaging and, of import for people to read about if you're interested in, U.S. history and, history of different ethnic groups. And I just like the way that the different parts of this book, the memoir, the religious aspects, and the history came together. For my second place book, this is one that was one of my first reads of the year, so I definitely had a lot more time to ruminate on it, and I think that's why it has made it onto this list because of those ruminations, and it is the novel Mobility by Lydia Kiesling. This is a book that tracks Bunny, the character of Bunny, from when she is a teenager to when she is about middle-aged. And she starts as the child of diplomats in Azerbaijan as there is an oil boom happening there, and the Iron Curtain has lifted, and capitalist forces have come in to help the country take advantage of this wealth they might have. So she learns a little bit about that world as a teenager. And then when she leaves college a decade or so later, she finds herself taking a job first, in an administrative role in the energy and oil industries, and it tracks how she becomes more and more involved with the oil industry in particular. And as she grows up, she is contending with the culpability of the environmental impact and the impact on communities the oil industry has. And I really liked this book. Well, again, I had a personal connection that Bunny is a character who's about my age and comes from my time period. So there's that. Like, I could almost like putting myself in her shoes if I made those choices. But at the same time, there are some other ways to identify with her professional career and the types of decisions she made. I just felt like they were very poignant, and also other things to flesh out her character in terms of a personal life with her family and other relationships. And I just thought, again, there's a message in this which doesn't become didactic, but it does ask the question of personal culpability. And it's a complicated one, especially, as she's, facing down the reality of having to, get a job and pay her bills and so forth. But she does ultimately hitch her wagon, and there's other ways that, her society has hitched their wagon to dangerous, ideals when it comes to oil. And so I just thought there was a lot of fascinating global issues and personal issues that just came together really well in this book. There is actually an epilogue that jumps to the future, which I don't think is as powerful, but I feel like overall I've just been thinking so much about this character and her journey and these questions that I can forgive that one part. And for my first place book, I feel like this is a particular novel and perspective I have been waiting for a long time, and I'm sure that's coloring my reaction to the book, but here we have it, and the novel is Joy Comes in the Morning by Jonathan Rosen. The perspective I've particularly been looking for is that of a progressive American Jewish religious figure, and in this case that figure would be a rabbi, a Reform rabbi of the modern age. I feel like so much Jewish literature hinges either on like the ultra-Orthodox or like, the secular, kitschy American Jewish, stereotypes, that sort of thing, and there isn't a lot of nuance in between. And again, I guess, part of it is, the personal connection that I'm someone involved in my progressive Jewish community. So this book is more in line in some ways with my own Jewish experience. It also is arguably pretty in line with the author's Jewish experience, because the two main characters are pretty much based on him and his wife. And so the character who's based on Rosen is Lev, who is the son of a Holocaust survivor, and he is particularly contending in this book both with a recent tragedy with his father and trying to figure out what his father is telling him about the arc of his life, And Lev himself recently has, had trouble sort of latching onto a future for himself. He recently ran away from the altar and that sort of thing. And meanwhile, this tragedy brings him into contact with Deborah, who is a Reform rabbi, and they're able to strike up a connection relatively quickly. And that connection, there is, the personal sort of sexual stuff, but also is about, he is looking kind of for meaning. And so she does, counsel him like in religious ways. There's a Talmudic study in here, which I think such a specific thing to Judaism, and it's also very exciting to see it, relayed in modern ways. And of course, that makes Deborah, who is like a fully fleshed character herself, a little reticent. She doesn't just want to be a mentor, if she's starting to fall for a guy. And I just feel like the relationship in here, there's like just some great visceral, contemporary reality sort of relationship stuff in here. I felt like the setting and, personal motivations, everything just really popped. And Deborah herself has a little bit of a moral crisis as she's dealing with a lot on her own plate. She has a large community of people that she has to provide for. A lot of times it means, providing, services like weddings and funerals for people who otherwise aren't that involved in the Jewish community, but, come for these big events. I just felt like this was so raw and real about what it means to be a modern person who is religiously educated or involved with the Jewish community, sort of contending with these issues. In a way, the other two books I talked about do have big thematic elements to them, but I feel like, despite, the fact that as people in a religious setting, they are dealing with events of morality and mortality and so forth, that there's something about this that is such more on the ground, and it's just about ultimately people living their lives and finding out what works best for them. And I just think it's a great representation of progressive Jewish life. And from there, I will move on to anticipated reads for 2025, and I'll be putting them in, chronological order by date. Publishing dates could change in the future, but at least last I checked, this is where things fall. Starting in January, in the very near future, we have All the Water in the World by Erin Kafal, which I just recently heard about through Thomas at SFF 180's science fiction roundup, so I'm very grateful to him for that. I was looking to add some science fiction to this list, and I think he found a pretty great one for me. That this is another one that's sort of a Station 11 pastiche novel comparison. I often, jump to books that have that comp in them. It takes place in the near future. There has been environmental catastrophe. The main characters are living like in what's left of Manhattan that's largely been flooded, and the flooding is getting bad enough that they feel they have to move. And, there's a lot of books that get compared to Station 11, but what really makes me hopeful here is that there seems to be a focus on preservation, and that a major impetus of the novel will be like asking what they should preserve culturally and bring to the next place, which I really feel like is part of Station 11 about preserving cultural past that really spoke to me. Next, at the end of January, we have The Thinking Heart, Essays on Israel and Palestine by David Grossman. I was really excited because Hannah from Hannah's Books recently mentioned this this book as well in one of her videos, and it certainly grabbed my attention. David Grossman is an Israeli thinker who speaks to me a lot. He has a progressive perspective. He is nuanced and a good writer. And this is his evolved understanding of the post-October 7th world, and where Israel and Palestine have come from and where they are now. And I am eager for his wisdom on these issues, and grateful that his essays have been translated into English. At the beginning of February, we have Isola by Allegra Goodman. Allegra Goodman is one of my favorite authors, and she's been relatively busy of late. And this is, in fact, historical fiction, which is a little off the beaten path of most of her other works. But yes, this takes place on a deserted French island, and it's a survivalist story that's been inspired by a 16th century heroine. So this, I think, is relatively new waters for Goodman, and I'm intrigued to see what she will do with it. Another favorite author who has been very less prolific is publishing in February as well, with We Would Never by Tova Mervis. This is her first novel in over a decade, so I am very, very excited, even though I believe it's going to be more of a murder suspense thriller genre than what I usually enjoy reading. But if anything's going to get me into these genres, of course it's going to be a favorite writer. And yes, a major part of the promotional material says this is a literary page-turner, exploring the extremes to which a family will go to protect their own. So I think hopefully there'll be some, personal family drama aspects that can be my bread and butter. Coming into March, we have a fantasy sequel I've been looking forward to. This is The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. At the end of 2023, I read The Sword Catcher, Cassandra Clare's foray into adult fantasy, and I was shocked by how much I actually enjoyed it. I gravitated toward it because she had some Jewish inspirations for her fantasy world building, and they came out on the page in much more nuanced ways than I was expecting, and I think more nuanced ways than a lot of Jewish fantasy goes into. It's a secondary world. It's sort of also vaguely inspired by medieval Venice, which brings the Jewish ghetto into the picture as well. We're following two main characters. Kel is a sword catcher, an orphan brought up off the streets to basically become a bodyguard physically for the prince, and sometimes he also just stands in the prince's place if the situation seems like it deserves it. Our second main character is Lynn, who is a Jewish-coded physician. It's an unusual situation for her as a woman, but these two characters come into contact when the prince's life is in danger. You might think the two of them start a romance together, but that doesn't seem to be where this is heading. There's lots of secondary characters, lots of intriguing plots that make this world seem really vibrant and lived in. There are forces within the walls of the palace and within the streets of the main city that, have designs on the political future of this land, and I think that Claire has really brought together all of these points well, with providing compelling characters. And I wasn't expecting to fall for a Cassandra Clare novel, but here we are, and now I'm excited to see where the story goes next. For my middle of March pick, I return to literary fiction with Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, another favorite author who has chosen the beginning of 2025 to publish. I have a bevy of riches. And again, I believe, this is another author who's basically taken a decade to write, so I'm expecting great things. And this novel is about a Nigerian travel writer living in the U.S., it brings in aspects of the pandemic, and then personally, ruminations on her past lovers and her choices and regrets. So very literary, but I love what this, author can do with character and with scene settings, so I'm really on board. But to save my biggest title for last, arguably at least for me, we have a new installment for The Hunger Games, which is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I've talked in other videos that The Hunger Games is kind of the hill I will die on when it comes to YA dystopia. The issues that Collins has focused on in her previous books, they've really resonated with me as I grapple with the idea of celebrity and of sort of dissociation with violence that seems to be happening in society more and more these days. And also ideas of like authoritarianism and how we relate to it. I feel like we're just on the same wavelength when it comes to how she presents those in a YA dystopian canvas. This book, you know, it is the second prequel to the big Hunger Games series. I believe it's supposed to, in part, cover Haymitch's games. He's a beloved character. You know, and to a certain degree, I have some apprehension, you know, as things, you know, widen into a franchise, you can lose sort of the thrust of the message at the beginning. But I've been so on board with how she has threaded larger messages and themes into these stories that it's not just shallow pandering to what's marketable. So I'm willing to give this a go, and I'm pretty eagle-eyed on when I'll be able to get my hands on a copy. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave Goodreads links down below to the anticipated books that I mentioned, and then my Goodreads reviews for the ones I've read and talked about from 2024. If you have any thoughts about these books, or any thoughts about your favorites from last year and anticipateds from this year, I'd love to hear about them. Let's keep the New Year's, you know, excitement just going, and hopefully we can, you know, have some great reading experiences, start things out with a bang. And speaking of such, I should be back on this channel in the near future to do my booktube spin video, my first quarterly booktube spin video of 2025. It is a TBR game I play thanks to Rick McDonnell, who brought it to booktube a few years ago, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.